I've always had a thing for bridges. I know that it's terribly silly. It must have started when I was a kid. My mother and father didn't get along too well, and when he would take me to see her, we would cross a bridge. It looked massive when I was little. The aging iron threatened to pierce the clouds above every time we made our journeys. On that bridge, over and over, I went to see Mom. People build bridges intending to connect. For better or worse, bridges represent a union. It's almost as though, in ancient times, the earth was covered in tiny gashes and humans would carefully sew stitches whenever they came across a wound, doing everything they could to prevent the earth from deteriorating. Every bridge I'd cross represented the opportunity to connect. And one day, when I crossed that bridge to see my mom for the final time, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a bridge out there that would connect me to her again. Not literally, of course, but a girl can have her flights of fancy, surely. In a more down-to-earth way, I felt if I just kept searching for bridges, new and old, lost and monumental, that I'd never truly lost her. Of course, I've crossed almost all the major ones in North America. Honestly, as imposing and wonderful as those behemoths are, it's the ones off the beaten path that call to me, the ones that are sullied with foliage and only tainted by an occasional passerby. Whenever I can secure enough time away from work, I'll plan a trip. I've never been great with people, so I don't have to worry about social engagements, so my map gets a few new X's on it, and I'll try to hit a few places up in one go. A lot of these bridges are locked away in little arboretums and small pockets of forest. Places too small to receive campers, but just big enough that a bridge over a passing body of water couldn't hurt. These are where the path less traveled waits for you, small trails that are barely carved into the earth, dead leaves hiding the secret the woods may contain. Once I find a bridge, I'll sit with it for a moment and take in the view it offers. I can always feel a tightness in my chest when I prepare to step off the bridge opposite of where I entered. It's as if I'm falling into another world, stitched to our own. Maybe it's hope that pains me so. But this is a story, is it not? I must have a story to tell. If all I did was ramble and share my mediocre sketches of the bridges I've come across, would you still be interested in continuing to read? No, I'm aware my hobby isn't for everyone, or most people for that matter. This story serves as a bridge, a desperate attempt for me to connect with you before I reach the other side. I had heard of a place called the Garland Woods in passing. Someone had mentioned the name in a coffee shop as I was waiting for my order. It was a place I hadn't heard of before, and admittedly, I became quite nosy regarding the conversation. My mind slipped away as two girls, possibly in their early 20s, were going on about the place. They had just come back from a trip and recounted that it was their favorite stop. Mixed in with that conversation were their musings about life and art, about a reigniting in their pursuits. For all intents and purposes, the place sounded nothing short of magical. That's all it really took. The Garland Woods wriggled its way into my brain, burrowing so deep that I didn't hear my name being called. It wasn't until the two ladies having the conversation turned to look at me, I realized I had slipped away in my head. I wanted to ask if they had spotted a bridge, but I didn't need to. As I took my coffee, the warmth plucking away at my bare skin, I knew it would. Despite the online murmurings, it took a bit of effort to find the woods, but I eventually found someone who posted the location. It almost felt like a treasure hunt. For whatever reason, people were trying to keep Garland a secret, maybe fearing that too many visitors would spoil the tantalizing atmosphere that everyone spoke of. Silly as it might have seemed as I was researching, in person was a different story entirely. I could feel the woods aura wrap around me the moment I stepped beyond the pale dirt parking lot. A cloak of whimsy nestled gently around my shoulders, courtesy of the surrounding pines. The way the sun pierced the canopy was magnificent, javelins of light hurled by Zeus himself, pinned into the forest floor. Every tree seemed greener than the last, contrasting against the dark shaded bark proudly displaying their ancient age. Initially there were a few other hikers, but the further I went in, the more isolated I became. The trail was sparsely traveled, only a few shades lighter than the surrounding brush. There were musings online of people getting lost in the Garland Woods, or if they simply chose not to be found. Not all who wander are lost. It took quite some time to find the Garland Woods footpath bridge. Not that I felt that my time had been wasted. On the contrary, it wasn't until I spotted the bridge that I remembered why I had gone. The bridge revealed itself to me in small portions at first. Its visage danced in and out of the gaps between trees. A mosaic came to fruition right in front of my eyes. The sun then so effortlessly plunged to the foliage and struggled to gleam against the aging metal of the bridge. Even through the trees, I could see the familiar flaking burgundy that had plagued so many of the bridges I visited. Time will yield no to man-made structure. Stitches only serve to hold the wound together until it has enough time to heal. They aren't meant to last. The woods set its pace and revealed the bridge in time with it. Each step offered a new angle and more insight. If the woods itself weren't so remarkable, I'd have said a part of me would have been disappointed. With the gossip surrounding the woods and the in-person confirmation of how incredible it felt to be there, the bridge was just a bridge, not unlike one I'd find on any other trail. I stood for a good while, taking in the structure. I looked over the wrought iron, the layer of beige dirt covering the textured metal panels on the ground. Eventually, I gained the angle needed to sketch the bridge quickly by circling it. The god rays peeked through the metal supports, mechanical trees. It was easy, no artistic hesitation, almost as if the woods guided my hand and brought the bridge to life on my page. Now I'm not much of an artist, but bridges are a subject that will typically look at least alright if given enough effort while sketching. The scratching lines of charcoal always seem to come together just right. Though the drawing felt like an afterthought upon stepping onto the bridge, everything felt like an afterthought. I left all my prior thoughts at the start of the bridge, as if some ethereal bellboy had taken suitcases full of memories from me. Despite how connecting bridges can usually feel, there's always a moment for me when I feel as though I'm outside of the natural world, led to my devices. Obviously, most of the time there are other hikers or cars nearby, but not in the Garland Woods. I was all alone. My feet kicked up loose patches of dirt, unsettling the dormant earth and revealing the metal underneath, just as amber-struck of the supports were. Tree branches reached across the thick railings of the bridge. They looked like spider legs closing in on me. Standing on the bridge, I realized it was wider than I initially thought, wide enough for a vehicle to pass over. Taking in the surroundings would, however, lead you to believe that there would be no access for the vehicles to reach the bridge. I theorized, at the time, that whoever built the bridge intended for it to support more foot traffic. Maybe whoever built the bridge didn't intend for the woods to be a closely guarded secret. As odd as the thought was, it gave me plenty of room to pace. There was a small and trickling run of water underneath, camped out in a small valley in the ground. Though even the word valley is too expressive, it looked like just enough of a divot to warrant the small footbridge during rainy seasons. It was there, in the middle of the bridge, peering over the side, that I conducted my ritual, a simple one, but a ritual nonetheless, just like I had at every other bridge I've visited, every stitch I've crossed, every unity I've explored. I rapped my knuckles against the iron of the bridge 4 times. Knock, 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 knock. My knuckles vibrated with each hit. I could feel the rust chipping off, bits of it clinging to my pale flesh. In the woods, isolated, I could hear the knocks echoing back to me, a duet with the trees. And with that, my time in the Garland Woods ended. I had read online that staying after the sun went down was dangerous, and the sky had indeed shifted its hue. The feeling of being on the bridge clung to my skin like moist air. Even as I was driving home, AC wafting over me, the dew ran down on me. It wasn't until the next day that I felt normal. Not that the sensation was unpleasant, just heavy enough to be noticed. That such a peaceful and magical place left me feeling tense was strange. Maybe I just secretly never wanted to leave the bridge. Life goes on though, and I returned to work. Days walked by me as the humdrum of routine settled in. When the fruits of my ritual truly bloomed is a mystery. It's possible I chalked it up to background noise a few times, or it was soft enough that I didn't hear it at all. But maybe 2 weeks after visiting the bridge, it registered for the first time. I was at my computer desk, sorting through emails. The night was quiet and undisturbed. One of those times when you feel that the stillness is unnatural, an entity all its own. And then, knock, 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 knock. It was soft, but in that calm entity, I could hear it. The knock was so low that for a moment I believed I imagined it. Still, my frame straightened and my hair pricked up. In the silence, I sat, waiting for any follow-up commotion. I never considered that it might have been my front door. It was late, I wasn't expecting anyone, and it just didn't sound like my door. Your mind can play tricks on you, though, that I know very well. If it's dark enough, you might start seeing things, and if it's quiet enough, you might hear things. For whatever reason, our brains have a grave distaste for the concept of nothing. Enough time went by without another intrusion that I brushed it off, but I do remember it. 2 days later, I was in the office typing away. The sound of my keyboard and others around the office clacking was, for just a moment, poisoned by it. 4 audible and purposeful knocks rang out just below the surface. Again, my body froze, but it was an office. It could have been anything. And so, the clacking of keys continued. That same night, the office closed, and we all shuffled out like robots going to their charging stations. Me and a few coworkers, people whose names I never learned, were walking down the street to the parking garage when knock, 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 knock. This time, it was loud and sudden. My heart pinged at the interruption and my attention pulled toward the noise. When I turned my head to the left, where the road would be, 2 intense orbs of light quickly met my gaze. I quickly reacted with my body being thrown backwards, as if I was trying to avoid jumping the curb. My elbows smacking against the cement were enough to snap my mind back to focus. There was nothing, only the sting on my elbows and hip. The street was empty, and there was nothing I could see that would have caused the light I saw. Had it really been that long of a day, staring at the computer all day? I wondered if I was having a migraine. It became one of those, I'll keep an eye on it, deals. I did not have to monitor it for long though. There was another innocuous set of knocks the next morning as I ate breakfast. But the bulk of the day went smoothly, all the way until I was getting ready for bed. The bristles of my toothbrush were scraping against my teeth, loosening up the day's residue. Warm water filled my cheeks as I swished it between my teeth, getting all the gunk gathered into a sickly pool. Holding my hair back with one hand, I leaned forward and released the pool into the sink. As the water smacked against the linoleum, I heard it, the 4 quick knocks, the same ones I had offered to every bridge I had been to. As the noise filled my ears, unmistakable and present, my heart dropped. And when I stood up straight again, a million tiny, icy needles pricked me all over. The bathroom mirror was gone. The bathroom wall was gone. My bathroom was gone. In the Garland woods, toothbrush in hand, I stood, dressed only in my PJs. I was stuck. I can't recall if I attempted to move. It was night. The trees lightly outlined the light silver light of the moon. In the dark, the woods seemed to go on forever, bleeding into one blotch of infinity. The spider leg-like tree branches felt so much closer to me than they did during the day. They even looked more like spider legs in the dark. The bright greens washed away into a desaturated fuzz. Without moving my head, my vision dropped, and I could see the moon dancing in the reflection of the small run of water. My brain was racing to comprehend the circumstance I was in, trying desperately to just quantify the experience as a dream. Still struggling to take in the surroundings, I became bathed in light, one so bright that I winced. In that light, my bathroom returned to me. The warm interior of my bathroom embraced the needle wounds, and I released the breath I had been holding with a violent shudder. My toothbrush collapsed onto the sink, and I onto the floor. It was useless fighting against the heavy breathing my nerves desired. Thoughts spiraled. My psyche was at war with itself. What happened was impossible. My brain knew it was impossible, and yet that same brain saw it. That very same brain felt the crisp air and tasted the faint nestling of rust. As I clutched at my chest on the bathroom floor, memories of learning about my mother's passing resurfaced. I thought that too was impossible. She seemed invincible all the way until the day I learned she wasn't. My brain thought she could never die. That very same brain had to cope with her death. I was in the kitchen when Dad delivered the news. On the kitchen floor and far too young, I writhed around. In the bathroom, I squirmed all the same, knees pulled up to my chest, fingers grasping at the fabric of my shirt. It took quite some time for my breathing to settle. Eventually, the grip on me loosened and my body uncurled. It took even longer to peel myself from that floor and accept that at some point, I'd have to go to bed like any other day. It was the same feeling I had on the kitchen floor as a child. It doesn't matter what happens on any given day, at some point, the day must end. As the blanket pulled over my shoulders, I struggled with the idea of going to the hospital. I thought about what they would do for me. I worried if I regaled my story, they'd assume it a hallucination and admit me. That would topple my life, anyone's really. So I tried to drift off until my body was just too exhausted to stay awake anymore. Just like it always has, the sun rose and peeked through my windows, landing on my eyelids to wake me up. The thought of calling my dad crossed by. I don't speak to him much these days. Like a bridge, Mom held us together, and when her support gave way, we just drifted apart. Calling him to tell him I was going crazy was a little much for my liking, though. I was tense that whole day, the previous night's events playing in my head over and over. Like prey, I sat there waiting for it. Waiting for those 4 knocks. The potential for them to appear played with my mind all day. I danced between relief that I wasn't hearing them and anxiety that I might. Instead of working, I tried to get more information on Garland. However, there wasn't much more than people excitedly posting their experiences. It almost made me angry that I might have gotten the short end of the stick on these magic adventures. With ire, I would look down from the screen at my notebook. It lay there open to the page where I had drawn the Garland bridge. Staring at the picture, I began rubbing my temple. The panic from the night before had left me exhausted. My hand rested over the keyboard. Absent-mindedly, I tapped away at the keys. I started to tunnel vision on the drawing and my hand tightened into a ball. Without thinking, my knuckles pressed down on the keyboard. Knock, 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 knock. There was a blemish on the piece of paper, a small black dot that I hyper-focused on. Freeing the fingers from my forehead, I placed my pointer on the blemish and wiped it from the drawing. It rested on my skin and, with my thumb, I attempted to smudge it. The ink graphite didn't break up as I expected it to, instead it poked. Because it wasn't graphite and it wasn't black, and I wasn't in my office. Beyond my finger and the small bit of rusted metal on it was once again Garland Woods. It was bright and colorful, just like the first time I had seen it. This time though, I didn't have time to soak it in. A loud and obnoxious boom rang out from the left. That's when I learned I could have moved the night before if I had wanted to. My head snapped to the sound, and the same bright lights met me. I started backing away immediately. It was a car barreling towards me. My heel caught something and sent me to the ground. I sprawled out against the carpet as my coworkers assembled to assess the commotion. The fibers of the shallow carpet clung to my lips as I gasped for air again. People were crowding around, tightening the little free space I had even more. Thankful that the burning in my knees was from the rug and not rusty metal, I tried to collect myself in front of my observers. This attempt to act professional fell apart with a glance at my notebook. It was still open to the drawing of the bridge, almost like someone had placed it under me, set dressing. A warmth brewed in my abdomen. The warmth became conscious and climbed up my throat as I stared at the page. Where I had seen the speck before were lines. They appeared just as they would if I had drawn them. The crude outline of a small girl standing by the railing of the bridge. She's facing away in the drawing. But I know her, of course. I know her. That little monster in my throat found its way to my mouth. Hot swill filled up my cheeks, and for a moment I thought about when I was brushing my teeth. I thought about pulling that sick and chunky vomit in and out of the gaps between my teeth. Even that momentary distraction was enough to fully vacate the vomit. It spilled like soup onto the company's nice white carpet. A wave of disgust and sympathy washed through the surrounding people. The dark green Rorschach test soaked the fibers. I hardly remember leaving. My body moved in a huff, leaving the mess behind as I headed into my car. I slammed the door shut, and the noise repeated. Knock, 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 knock. For a moment, the air felt fresh inside the car, and I could hear running water, but I quickly slammed my fist against my leg. This helped me stay inside my car long enough to get it started anyway. At one of the red lights, I lost focus and didn't notice that it had turned green. Someone behind me honked. The honk warped and lowered into a repeating knock. I rapidly blinked my eyes and like spliced up film, I quickly shifted to Garland and back again between blinks. The car honked again and I drove off, fingers laced around the steering wheel so tight they resembled the pale dirt on the bridge. Was this the state someone should drive in? No, of course not. I couldn't think. It felt like the moment I let myself. I started returning to Garland. All I had to do was focus, rein it in and just get home. The taste of my previous expulsion still lingered on my tongue. It sat there until it tasted like tree bark. Now and then I would hear the knocks and needed to injure myself quickly to snap away from the spell Garland had on me. It's funny to think about it now, but I kept the radio off. I thought about how horrible it would be to hear knocking on heaven's door. The knocking stopped after an hour or two. My body loosened up. Even the pain living in the minor cuts I had given myself was hurting less. Small trails of my sap ran down my arms where I had pressed the fingernails in, but nothing so major I couldn't handle it at home. I just needed to get back there. Just when my defense lowered, like I needed to be off guard, the world went silent. The rumbling of my tires ceased and my breathing muffled out. Everything muted just so I could hear it. The knocking, 4 methodical knocks rang out from inside of me, a noise I could not escape no matter where I was. This time, I felt it. I could feel myself being plucked from one place and put into another. Still in my car, I slammed my palm against the wheel, hoping the sound of my horn would snap me out of it. My foot pressed on the brakes as I barreled towards the Garland Bridge. I could see myself reacting to the car, backing away and beginning to fall over. I met her eyes. I knew she couldn't see me. I couldn't see me just a few hours back. And just before I saw myself hit the ground, a truck passing by angrily honked its horn and I was back on the road again. Stopped in the middle of the road, I turned to the left just in time to see the truck passing by, its hull vanishing from view and revealing the entrance to the Garland Woods. Quickly pulling the car to the side of the road, I opened the door and fell out of it like wet noodles. Hunched on the ground, I sobbed, warm liquid slipping down my cheeks, my howls bouncing around the pavement. Again, fingers clutched at my chest as I rambled, pleading to nothing. Why is this happening? Please stop. I don't want to do this. I just kept waiting and hoping that I would flicker back to the office or my bed or just anywhere else. I'd have to accept it though. I only live a few minutes from work and I had been driving for hours. Some part of me drove back to the woods, and no matter what happens, the day must end. You can't hold on to it forever. Determination set in and I stepped out. As if I wanted to give the woods a piece of my mind, I rushed into them. One sturdy step after another, I hardly paid attention to where I was going. I knew that no matter what, I was going to end up back at that damn bridge. The leaves crunched under each step, the woods trying to warn the bridge of my arrival. There was no magic upon seeing it this time. No wonder to behold, just a rusting and jagged piece of metal. Crunching leaves became creaking metal as I stepped onto the Garland Bridge. What? My voice carried, a gust of wind making it seem like the woods shuddered at my behest. What do you want? I scream. My face felt hot. My mind flooded with memories, and just like with the Garland Bridge, I felt as though I was in them. I watched the same bridge pass by over and over. I remember every time I stepped into the car as a little girl, every time my dad loaded my backpack up. It made my chest tight again, painfully so. Knees became weak as I remembered running up to my mother's door, memories jumping from one outfit to the next. That little girl, so excited, running up those stairs. I remembered that little girl on the kitchen floor bawling her eyes out, a pain she felt she'd never recover from. That bridge she one day no longer needed to cross. It would not bring her to Mama anymore. She'd try to find a bridge that would, knowing that bridges connect while also shutting off the world around her. Bridges can take you anywhere you want to go, and they can take you from anywhere you don't want to be. The railing of the bridge became my only support. Trying to hold a heavy and mournful body up is not so easy. My fingers hovered over the rusted metal. The sky was becoming dark and small flecks of rain pattered against the bridge. I don't want to, I cried, hearing the defeat in my voice. My fingers gripped the metal tightly. I can't. I wonder how many trips it was. How many times have I crossed the same bridge? How many times have I stood in front of the same door? Something so routine became me, and once the routine was gone, I searched for stitches to hold me together. But that's no way to live, is it? Barely held together, never really healing. Always good enough. Sometimes what it takes to heal truly hurts. I know that, but it's easy to just say things. Doing, however. With the sky growing dark, my breath calmed. I only really cared about bridges after Mom. It's not a part of my life she'll ever know about. She didn't care about the bridge, she just waited to see her little girl. I remember standing in front of her house, so excited to let her know I was there. My fingers balled up, grating against the aged bridge that called me back to it, trying to connect me, trying to make me whole again. Magic isn't always pretty or easy, and with my knuckles pressed to the metal, I thought back to all those days in front of her door. I stood up straight and proud on the Garland bridge, and just like all the times before, I let my mama know I was there. We had a secret code, so she would know it was me knocking. Wanna guess what it was?